What's up, everybody? Welcome in to The Lawyer You Know. My name is Peter Tragos. Somebody reminded me the other video that I almost never introduce myself at the beginning of videos because we usually just jump right into the topics, which I prefer and I know you prefer. But my name is Peter Tragos. I'm a personal injury attorney in Florida, a trial attorney, civil trial attorney, used to do a lot more criminal work. My dad is our criminal trial guy now. We have 6 lawyers in our firm. We practice all over the United States. But what I love to do on here when I have a mic in front of my mug and a camera pointed at me is talk about cases that are going on in our country and answering the questions you all have. And today, the case we're talking about is Alec Baldwin, part 2, as he has been indicted again on very similar charges to the first time around. And we're going to talk about in today's video, just this one video, we're going to be talking about the new charges, what the language is, what the arguments will be for both sides, whether his comments and interviews are going to come into play based on these charges and based on the elements. We're going to talk about the other co-defendants, potential trials, plea deals that have been taken, how it'll affect Alec Baldwin's case. We're going to talk about what's different this time around, why these second set of charges are coming. We're going to talk about what the defense has come out and said and what their quotes are since these new charges have come down. They've been very confident and very successful throughout this case, representing Alec Baldwin every step of the way, unlike the prosecution. We're going to talk about experts and how important they're going to be in the process. And we're going to finish by talking about whether or not this is just something that should have stayed in civil court and been handled in civil court. Because we know there was already civil lawsuits and claims filed, settlements made, monies paid. Is that where it should have stayed, or should it be here in criminal court? And like somebody just said, will this one stick? So make sure you get your questions in as we go. This is live. We are riding here together. We'll be starring your questions, answering them as we go throughout the video. Hit that like button if you guys haven't already, because we are going to jump in right now without wasting any more time and read these actual charges that he's been indicted on. And we know about secret grand jury proceedings. The prosecutor presented the evidence and the claims to grand jurors, probable cause standard, not beyond a reasonable doubt, probably similar to a civil standard, if you want to say that, more probable than not. And the grand jury did, in fact, indict him. There's no defense attorney there, no defense attorneys arguing, defenses being made, things like that. But at least some grand jury has indicted him on these 2 counts. He can only be guilty of 1, as I understand it, in New Mexico, which makes sense when we read them. So let's take a read here. Count 1, involuntary manslaughter, negligent use of a firearm. On or about October 21st, 2021 in Santa Fe County. In case you don't know what this case is about, you're about to find out. State of New Mexico, at Bonanza Creek Ranch, located at 545 Bonanza Creek Road, Santa Fe, New Mexico 87508. The above named defendant, which is Alec Baldwin, did cause the death of Helena Hutchins while working on the set of the movie Rust. In the commission of, so how did he cause this death? Negligent use of a firearm, an unlawful act. So it's negligent use of a firearm. Negligence is not using reasonable care, not acting as a reasonable person should and would do, not doing your duty. Negligence is duty, breach, causation, damages. You had a duty to act safely. You breached that duty, and your breach, what you didn't do, caused the damages. The damages here are death. That's easy. The gun caused those damages. That's easy. But duty and breach are going to be the difficult parts that we are going to find out how the state is going to present that evidence before a criminal jury. And one of the ways that we expect that to happen, and the main way, is through expert testimony. Now, when the charges, in these cases, the charges were filed a while ago. I don't even know how long ago it was. They filed it under the wrong enhancement that wasn't even in place at the time. A prosecutor that shouldn't have been handling the case. They dropped that enhancement that was wrong. They dropped that prosecutor, new prosecutors in, giving press conferences, doing all this stuff. Baldwin's attorneys smash it. It goes away. But the door was always left open for this to happen again now. They talked about new evidence and new testing and things that have come forward that they think are going to make them more successful this time around. And I expect that they're planning to prove what Alec Baldwin's duty was with expert testimony, whether it's going to be Hollywood experts about what actors should and shouldn't do, what they should know or shouldn't know, what producers should know and shouldn't know. What's the armorer's job? Is it really the producer's fault since he hires the armorer? Things like that. And this is all going to intertwine as we discuss the other defendants in, I'm not going to say this case because they all have different cases, but in these sets of circumstances here. So in order to prove what his duty was and whether he breached his duty, it's going to be really important for them to set the standard of what an actor / producer's duty is in these circumstances. And we know one of the things that's going to be really important about that is the testing, because FBI's reports have come out saying Alec Baldwin did this, and more on that in a second. Next, actually, let's take a look at this. Let's dive into this before we read the second charge. So the FBI did a report, and they said there is no way this live ammunition exited this gun without Alec Baldwin pulling the trigger. Now, whether or not actors should pull the trigger, what kind of guns they should use, what kind of safety they should use. Allegedly, he rejected more safety training. Allegedly, this was called a safe gun, cold gun when he was given. Allegedly, there was not supposed to be any live ammunition on the set. All of that working in Alec Baldwin's favor. But what's not working in his favor? And we remember because we discussed a lot of this together when it was happening real time, and we didn't really love that he did this as a lawyer. A lot of times criminal defendants think they can talk themselves out of situations, but let's listen to this quote real quick about Alec Baldwin.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never.
We're going to listen to it one more time. I didn't pull the trigger. No. I would never point a gun at somebody and pull the trigger. Never would I do that.
And speaking out to ABC News.
Well, the trigger wasn't pulled. I didn't pull the trigger.
So you never pulled the trigger?
No. I would never point a gun at anyone and pull a trigger at them. Never.
He would never do that. So if I'm the prosecutor on this case, my first question would be, why? Why would you never do that? Because you agree it's negligent. You should not do that. You agree it is wrong. A reasonable person would not do that. And you use his own words against him to set the standard by which you convict him. You have these interviews to use. He's probably going to take the stand if this thing goes to trial, would be my guess. And the FBI says they can prove he pulled the trigger based on their testing of the gun, their reenactment type deals, their reports, and their testimony. Rebecca said, obviously the trigger was pulled, Peter. Listen, I'm not going to say anything is or is not obvious in this case. I am not. But I think there will be some jurors, and that's why it's so important to get your comments. And thank you, Rebecca, for also gifting 20 Lawyer You Know memberships. That's awesome. Hopefully everybody has their gifting turned on. Floodgates have been opened. But some people are going to think it's obvious he had to pull the trigger. And there's going to be testimony that says he pulled the trigger. He's going to say he didn't pull the trigger. And I bring this up to say, if he said nothing, I think this case is really hard to prove against him. But as we've seen in Murdoch and some other cases, if the state can prove you lied and you told a big lie, let's say the jury believes he lied about this. He went and did an interview trying to protect himself, but because of the FBI testimony and the testing and the reports that they think a trigger was pulled, and then therefore there's no way around it. Alec Baldwin lied if you believe the trigger was pulled. Then it becomes a lot harder for him to win. John O'Rourke, can someone be indicted twice for the same crime? Yes. So they can't be tried and then lose and then come back and indict him again. But if they dismiss the charges without prejudice, which is what happened at the time, pretty sure you were there in our last video. You probably just don't remember because it was a long time ago. But if you want to go check it out, you can. They dismissed the charges without prejudice, meaning they can refile in the future, as long as it's within the statute of limitations, which it seems this one is. I don't know what it is exactly in these circumstances. Popcorn Power said, how did live ammunition get into that gun in the first place? Well, we're going to talk about this a little bit more when we get to the other defendants. Lady Cat. Does it seem like Alec's words will be used against him? Absolutely. Probably for and against him. His attorneys, even though they probably, if they were put on a lie detector, would say they wish he didn't give those interviews, they'll probably try to use some of it to his benefit. The best evidence and playing the entirety of the interview if they're going to play it, not just picking bits and pieces of it to make him look bad. So we will see. All right, let's read count 2 here. Involuntary manslaughter without due caution or circumspection. On this date at these locations, the above named defendant did cause the death of Helena Hutchins by an act committed with total disregard or indifference for the safety of others. So a little bit different than negligent use of a firearm, right? Duty, breach, causation, damages, that's negligence. This is total disregard or indifference for the safety of others. And the act was such that an ordinary person would anticipate that the death might occur, under the circumstances. A 4th degree felony. Both of these are looking at up to 18 months in prison. Everybody asks that. What makes it a felony is more than a year in county jail. Then you go to prison. 18 months, 4th degree felony is basically the lowest level of felony that there is. And that's how you know this is on the borderline of something that should be civil and criminal, which will kind of be the last point we talk about. So again, the way you prove total disregard or even like a willful indifference could be with his own words, could be with the emails and text messages, the lack of safety, the lack of oversight. But the state has to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very, very high burden. One other thing I want to talk about, because I got this question a bunch too. An unlawful act, here back up in the first count, an unlawful act, or in the alternative. So it's either one that he can be convicted of, not both. An unlawful act which did not amount to a felony. So they talk about the negligent use of a firearm, did not amount to a felony, a 4th degree felony. People are like, what the heck does that mean? They said it didn't amount to a felony, and then they said it does amount to a felony. But if you're committing a felony that results in death, most jurisdictions have a felony murder statute, which is a 1st degree felony, usually a more serious felony than a 4th degree felony that we're dealing with here. But because this death did not happen during the commission of a felony, it's a 4th degree felony. Meaning, if you're robbing a house and somebody dies, like you can rob a house with a knife and somebody has a heart attack and dies, felony murder. Or you can rob a house with a gun, not planning to shoot anybody, and on your way out, they're shooting at you, you shoot back at them, and they die. Even though you didn't intend to kill them, you're committing a felony, somebody dies, felony murder. Kidnapping, we've seen it in other cases. A lot of cases, we've seen felony murder be one of the charges. So that's all that means. Did not amount to a felony, a 4th degree felony. A bunch of people had that question, so I want to make sure to answer it. Okay. So again, expert testimony is going to be incredibly important with this reckless disregard. Doesn't make it harder, Peter. I don't know what doesn't make it harder. And Rebecca, thank you for 5 more memberships. Marty is here. 2 years smoke-free today. That's awesome, Marty. Congratulations. We're pumped about that. Francis said, I don't understand how an actor can be held liable for the accidental shooting. It wasn't his job to make sure the gun wasn't loaded. Which brings us to the other defendants. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, the armorer, and A.D. Holes, the assistant director, associate director, whatever he is, associate producer, whatever David Holes is. David Holes has already pled guilty. So he's taken ownership of his wrongdoing. Will he flip and testify against other people? We'll see. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed has continued to maintain her innocence and is apparently going to trial next month. So how can 3 different people, including these charges against Alec Baldwin, how can 3 different people be guilty for the same act? It's not charged as a conspiracy. They didn't work together to make this happen. So how can all 3 of them be at fault? Well, it is possible if each one did something individually that resulted in the death and each one is convicted of that crime individually. But what's also very likely is they point the finger at each other. That's what I expect to happen. Gutierrez Reed says Baldwin should have known by how it was held or how heavy it was, and he should have never pointed it at her. He should have pointed it next to her. Everybody knows you don't point a gun at anybody, even if it's not loaded, even if it's a toy. That's negligent on its own. Those are going to be the kinds of arguments I expect people to make. Just because David Holmes has pled does not make it more likely that Alec Baldwin gets convicted. It might make it less likely if he can point the finger. Rebecca said, therein lies your problem. Did he know that there were live rounds on set? Where does your culpability lie? And that's really all of these questions, right? Who's responsible for it being a fake gun or a real gun? Well, it turns out it was a real gun at this point. We're pretty confident about that. Live rounds being on set versus dummy rounds. Who's responsible for that? But once they get into the gun, who's responsible for it? Once it's called a cold gun, who's responsible for it? Does the actor ever gain responsibility for what happens when they're holding a gun, pointing it at somebody? And what will Alec Baldwin say about that? Because again, that little snippet from that interview is really important to me because even he knows you never point the gun and pull the trigger. Ever. No. I would never do that, he says. So he is creating that duty or affirming that duty for himself, in my opinion, in that interview. Because maybe there would be testimony that a lot of you are saying, like, it's never the actor's fault. The actor doesn't know. That's why we pay people on set to do this or that. But he's saying, like, regardless of what you have other people know, I would never point the gun and pull the trigger. So what's different this time around? Second set of charges, no enhancement. But what's different? Well, they say there's new evidence. And there is new testing done to evidence. There's a new special prosecution team. They've filed the appropriate charges. And they've put together more expert analysis and reports that now they're confident going forward. That's basically what's new. I don't know if that's enough. I don't know if it's not. That'll be up to a jury one day eventually. And what does the defense say about it? What do they think? Are they scared? Are they shaking in their boots? No. All they've done is win throughout this process. Getting prosecutors booted, getting charges booted, and eventually getting all the charges dismissed. And that might happen again. They're very confident, and they say they look forward to their day in court. As the quote, and a lot of people say, what does that mean? Why would anybody really want their day in court? It's not that they want it. As a defense lawyer, you'd always rather never get your day in court and just have the case dismissed. That's always option A and the best case scenario in these situations. But if they're going to continue to, what you would say, do the wrong thing in charging him in this case, then you look forward to your day in court. And that's it. Netwoman, in my humble opinion, it doesn't really matter if there was live ammunition or not. And Netwoman, we always love your opinion, and I appreciate your generosity so much once again. In the 80s, John Eric Hexum was filming a show, and they had a long delay on set. As a joke, he took a prop gun and pretended to shoot himself in the head. Even blanks can kill with negligence. After that happened, Hollywood was on notice. This is not the first mishap using a firearm. Brandon Lee, a lot of people know about, and it's not the last, would be my guess, which is sad and scary. So where do we draw the lines? When do we draw the lines? Who's responsible? That's something that really could be crafted out of this case. That could be something that we find out more about because of this case. But when we look at these charges up on the screen right now, it's not just about he probably shouldn't have done this. It's more likely true than not that Alec Baldwin messed up here. Because that's the civil standard. This is criminal court. They have to prove his negligence. They have to prove his duty beyond a reasonable doubt. So if both sides have experts that say, no, once it's called a cold gun, like we've heard from Baldwin's side, you actually are not allowed to go in there and check it because it wastes time, it wastes money, it could screw it all up. They could have to go through all the safety checks again. So if you're like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I mean, I probably believe the prosecutor's expert who said the last person holding the gun knows you never point it and pull the trigger. But I mean, Baldwin's side could kind of make sense too. Then you lose in criminal court, and you should lose in criminal court. It should be beyond every single and to the exclusion of every single reasonable doubt. So was there negligence here? I think the answer is probably yes. And that, again, is more in line with civil court than criminal court. We'll do more on that later. What chance does he have to take a plea? If there is one, would it even include jail time? Probably not. I bet they'd give him a plea without jail time. I think they'd give him a plea right now. They would say he took responsibility, criminal culpability. He's agreeing with us that he admits he did wrong here. Could he be charged with perjury? No, not from those statements. He wasn't under oath or anything like that, unfortunately. Marty said, I meant 1 year. Didn't use why didn't they use a replica gun? Realism for the craft, for the art, because we like to see realistic things happen in movies. I mean, that's all I can really think of. Rebecca said, I would never pull the trigger or give a medication in a syringe that I didn't put in. However, you got a point, Peter, which is why your channel is the best. But I think that's the point, Rebecca, you're making is I can sit here and explain it however I want. What is a layperson sitting on that jury that could be a nurse like you going to think when they hear this evidence? They're going to apply it to their job just like you did here. Just because somebody tells me here, stick this in somebody's arm, am I going to? What am I going to do to check it? Because at the end of the day, I'm the last line of defense if I'm the one holding the gun and pulling the trigger. And that's the tough part here, is trying to determine that. Ginny, thank you for gifting a membership. And RS, thanks for gifting a membership. And it's a great time to join. Donna, welcome. And Brianna and Gringa, because our members only live for January is going to be Wednesday. 2 days from now, we're still locking in a time. But I think what we're going to do is react to a certain SNL clip on and this is just for the members only. It's not going to be up on, the main YouTube stuff because we do kind of different or fun stuff. But it's really interesting, actually, some reactions to an SNL clip about a case we've been discussing on here. Jill Coe, welcome. Yeah, and it's not Alec Baldwin. I know he's done a lot on SNL. It has nothing to do with Alec Baldwin, but more on that later, coming Wednesday. And Rebecca's bringing 10 more members with her. Thank you, Rebecca. All right. Let me hit this one here. The helpful stranger. Safety is always the responsibility of the person holding a firearm. A simple check would have prevented this. End of story. So the question is, what testimony from an expert would change your mind, or could it? Or are you pretty locked in here that this is what you think and this is what you believe? Because that's going to be the difficult part for anybody to overcome, is if people walk in thinking they know whose duty is what, and you're going to try to change their mind as a lawyer with the law, with experts, with arguments, with whatever it is. KO, so the person responsible for loading the gun has been charged. Yes, both the people responsible for handling and getting which gun and which ammunition on set, both of them have been charged. One has pled guilty. One is going to trial next month if it actually goes. Cat Mom, in this day and age, there's no reason to use a real gun to make a movie. Ditto. There's no reason to actually point it at somebody either. Point it next to them to where if you were going to fire it, it wouldn't hit anybody. We have all these angles and CGI. We can make it look real. We don't need to take these chances for our entertainment, in my opinion. I don't want to get on my soapbox, but it is frustrating to think that there actually is this kind of risk on movie sets so that we could spend $15 for 2 hours to go watch a movie with some action. All right. So one of the incredibly interesting parts of this, Mommy Source, I've been waiting to put this comment up. They rebuilt the gun to test. Is that fair? So one of the things I wasn't really keen on the first time around, or I don't know when this all came out, but during FBI testing, they tested it to a level where the gun actually failed. The internal parts of the gun used failed. So they either rebuilt it, got a new gun, a similar gun, whatever it may be, to do the testing to determine that this could not happen without pulling the trigger, which is the biggest question in the case. And to me, that is an amazing argument for a good criminal defense lawyer. We have gotten so many cases to go away or won at trial when evidence has been damaged or destroyed during testing by the FBI, which then could affect our testing, number one. Number two, could affect the reliability of the testing or of the evidence, or not allowing that evidence to be actually presented to the juror because it's gone because of your testing. Now, we've seen it not work out in Murdaugh when multiple pieces of evidence were tested so much that it rendered them completely useless to the other side or to the jury to review, and he was still convicted. But in this case, I expect the criminal defense attorneys to make a multitude of arguments based on this. Number one, the internal parts of the gun failed during your testing, which is exactly what happened when Alec Baldwin, not Murdaugh, was holding this weapon. They failed, something went wrong, something unexplainable happened. He didn't pull the trigger and it fired because the internal parts of this gun are screwed up. We've used this with cell phones. We've used this with DUI breathalyzer machines. We've used it with weapons. We've used it with all sorts of things. Cars. Once it's messed up, once it's destroyed, once it's damaged, everything that happened with that piece of equipment before can be questioned. Number two, once you rebuilt it or used a similar firearm and something different happened after you rebuilt it or after that firearm was different and brought in, is what we're going to use to differentiate it from the one in question. Sure, the new one or the rebuilt one has to have their trigger pulled before it will fire. Sure. It's because it's new. It's because it's different. But this weapon, in this circumstance, in this case, that Baldwin was holding is not the same as the one you tested, which calls into question the reliability of your expert testimony. I expect those arguments to be made. Also, maybe, as we've seen in other cases like Melly, like Murdaugh, this investigation and testing was done in a piss poor way. How are you going to damage the one piece of evidence that matters most in this case? Why were they not more careful? Did they not want us to be able to test it? Did they not want you to be able to see it? Because now we can't. Now you can't. Because they damaged it. Because they destroyed it. Because it failed. All of those arguments and more can be made about this firearm in question now. And Mommy Soros is already asking the question, is this fair? The helpful stranger said, nothing could change my view. The only way to keep accidents from happening is for adults to act in a safe manner at all times. Now, I like this as a starting point as a PI lawyer. Let's be safe. And if you're not safe, you're going to get hit for it. I just don't know where it crosses over into the criminal realm in a situation like this. That's really the question. I don't think anybody's arguing with you that there was definitely some negligence here and everybody's at fault, at least civilly. Rebecca, you think it's a simple check. What does a live round and a cold round look like? So they look different. They feel different. Weight sounds different when you shoot them. Like there's a lot of differences apparently, but I'm just saying off my experience and talking to people on this case and talking to ballistics experts, but I want to see how it's presented at trial if it goes that far. Because I do think this is what a lot of the trial is going to go through. And normal people like us, I'll call myself a normal person. I am not a gun expert. We're going to have to listen to expert testimony, determine and figure out what makes more sense. And does it make more sense to the bar of beyond a reasonable doubt? Or is it kind of just like, yeah, I could see this going either way. The prosecution's probably right, but that's not enough for beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's what I keep coming back to in my own head is, will they be able to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt? Northern Ireland nincompoop. Can the fact that Baldwin paid out the Hutchins family in a civil lawsuit come into this trial? So usually no. Usually it's confidential and the defense wants to keep it out. But there are a lot of interesting circumstances to this situation, and kind of we'll hit our final portion of the video here, the civil versus criminal situation. We've already touched on it. But claims have already been filed. Money has been paid out civilly to the Hutchins family. So what is their cooperation, or what is their feeling on the criminal charges? Do they want it? I've read reports that say they're excited or interested to see justice in the criminal realm, meaning they're on board and they're cooperating as victims. But we've heard in the past that they just want it all to go away. They don't want Alec Baldwin to be charged criminally. They're satisfied with the civil settlement and they want to just move on. So if the victims do not cooperate, always, as we say in every video, it makes it a lot more difficult on the prosecution to get that conviction. So to me, I think this feels more like a civil case. If I was prosecuting it on the civil or criminal side, I'd feel a lot more confident in the civil case than the criminal case. Now, it's interesting because when you have a negligence claim in criminal cases, it's like, well, what's the difference? You're proving the same elements: duty, breach, causation, damages. But as we've tried to hammer home as much as possible, it is a much, much higher burden. The most common percentages given to the civil burden is 51%, even though it's really 50.01% or 0.00001%. It's just over 50%, but most commonly referred to as 51% in the civil world. And in criminal, people like to use 99% or 90% or something in the 90s. You have to be sure. So it's a big difference, almost double, you could say. Cat Mom, aka Vicky B, says reasonable doubt because of the gun. Alec found not guilty. And it's going to be interesting to see how people look at this. Andy is a new member. Welcome, Andy. Rebecca, oh my dear Peter, I have shot many of guns. Not my point. No, I get it. I was saying myself. And I was saying you were applying it to you as a nurse. And then I was saying to myself, the experts are going to have to teach me a lot about guns here if I was on this jury. But a lot of people will apply it to what they know. My point is I responsibly carry a gun, grew up with them, slept with them, and respect them. And I think there's going to be a lot of people like that. I don't know. I'm assuming more gun carriers in Nevada than California. Probably not as many as in Florida, but we'll see what this jury makeup looks like. Mercy Cat, did you watch law enforcement interview of cast crew? They tried to trip Jensen Ackles up. He didn't have a lawyer with him. He did tell them he always checks for himself, regardless of armor. Helena was standing in for Jensen. So I saw some interviews, not all of them. And I'm interested to see which ones come into play really as potential witnesses in this case. So a question I have for all of you guys. Do you think this is something that is appropriate for the criminal court system? Being people that are citizens of the United States. Thank you, Netwoman, for gifting 10 more memberships. This was a great live to jump in on if you wanted to become a member before our members only live here. So as a citizen here, this set of circumstances, knowing what you know, which we don't know everything, we just know certain reports. I am absolutely positive. I think this is perfect for the civil justice system. Somebody was damaged to the ultimate level. Their family's affected forever because of stupidity, negligence, gross negligence, indifference, whatever you want to call it, cutting corners. All of the reports about, penny pinching and hiring an inexperienced armorer and not checking and not taking extra safety training and pointing it and whether you pulled the trigger or not. All of those things you shouldn't have done. You shouldn't have done. And I think I can prove that you probably dropped the ball. So there's no doubt in my mind this is perfect for the civil court. And I'm glad to hear that settlements were made, money was given. I think he's like the executive producer on it or something now. Some long-lasting potential legacy effects, things like that. Because that's all we can do. We can't bring her back in the civil court. So all of the remedies that were available to them were used and accomplished in the civil justice system, which is the point of the civil justice system. It's not an eye for an eye. You don't get to go do this to the person that negligently hurt someone you love. It's not a barbaric society, although some might argue with that. So that's the best we have. But when does it cross in to criminal? When is the indifference a total disregard for other people's safety? When do we need to deter this from happening in the future? Some people say it's great they settled so quick. Some people said it must not have hurt that much, so it's not that much a deterrent when rich people are just throwing money at problems. I can see both sides of that argument, but that's really what I want to know from you guys. What do you think? How does this cross into criminal? Because I can see it. I can see it. I just think this one was probably more appropriate for the civil world and only the civil world. I don't think it's impossible that they convict him here. I don't. If I was the prosecutor, I probably would not have brought these charges. Sandy, he was also producer on the film. He should be held accountable as producer also. Yes, civilly. Yes, civilly. I agree with you. There's no doubt in my mind. And I hope, I shouldn't say I hope, he deserved to pay a lot of money, civilly speaking. Love, thank you for gifting 20 new memberships. But we're sitting here, potentially 18 months in prison on the line, of being a convicted felon, affecting certain other rights and his life and his legacy, potentially. So it is a big deal. It is a bigger deal. And there's only certain circumstances where accidents can even become crimes. And this is one of them. It can be. Will it be? I don't know. Cat Mom, sorry about the Bucks. Go Niners. All right. I knew this was coming. Rebecca from North Dakota here. Sorry about your Bucks. They overachieved. So I'm not that sorry about it. I'm not that sad about it. They overachieved. I had a feeling this was coming sooner or later. They put up a pretty good fight. I got to be honest. I thought it was going to be even worse against the Lions in Detroit. It seemed like that atmosphere was crazy. So I'm proud of them. I think it's good. Hopefully we got something to build on. It's tough to see what the real ceiling of this team is if it wasn't just hit this year, but we'll see what happens. And Rebecca, 10 more. Just a champ today. So a lot of people saying they think it should be civil. Some people saying it should be jail time. Just to get kind of a vibe and feeling of what the channel's thinking. Civil, not criminal. Civil, absolutely criminal. So Pesky, does negligence require that he pulled the trigger? No. It requires that he breached his duty. And it's vague because we can fill this in sometimes with expert testimony or the testimony of Alec Baldwin himself. What is his duty? What is reasonable care in this situation? Is it pulling the trigger? Because it could be. And if it is, and that's his argument, and the jury doesn't know beyond a reasonable doubt that he did, then he could win. But if it's just pointing a firearm at somebody and maneuvering it at all, if that's negligence, then maybe they can prove it beyond reasonable doubt. And so the experts and the lawyers are going to have to make those arguments and prove what is his duty. Is his duty just to make sure the gun's not loaded, regardless of if he pulled the trigger? Is his duty to check it before he holds it up? Should he have known because it was heavier? Because the way it sounded, felt, looked, whatever. Those are all going to be questions for this jury that are going to have to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Another thing I forgot to mention that's happening in 5 minutes is Donna Adelson was back in court. And some really good questions that you all had about how can Dan Raspbaum represent her after representing her son, Charlie? Isn't that going to be a conflict of interest? Well, a very short hearing was had to answer all those questions, see how Donna Adelson felt, see what the judge said, see what Donna Adelson said, and whether or not this trial is going sooner rather than later. Are they going to waive speedy trial or not? So stick around for that at 3:15. I'm going to hit a few more questions on the way out. Cat Mom said civil, yes. Criminal, no. Gringa, how does intent play into this situation? So either willful indifference, that he was, intentionally indifferent, didn't take the safety classes, didn't care, held the gun up there, pulled the trigger, shaked it around, grabbed the hammer, whatever. He didn't have to intentionally hurt anybody. Netwoman, Peter, every live is a great live to be on. We love your analysis. Cap's intentional this time. Good. I love it. I hope that you and Whitney are staying dry in our usual arid California. So I'm not there yet. I will be there Thursday morning, and I'm looking forward to it. Going to LA Thursday morning. We'll see what happens with the videos. I'll probably have some pre-recorded stuff. Maybe I'll go live from LA. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'll see a celebrity or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll see Netwoman. Susan, thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Appreciate that. Civil is too easy for rich people. He could have had insurance, sure. But this is a sentiment a lot of people think. Paul said, go Lions. They're kind of a fun story this year, Paul. I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it if they made a run and won it all. I like Lamar Jackson. I like Patrick Mahomes. I'm a big quarterback guy, so I like pick a lot of my things. Jared Goff doesn't usually do it for me, but I like a good redemption story. You know, they gave up on him, the Rams. Spitfire, thank you for gifting 5 memberships. Let me see here what else we have. Misty said, I believe Court TV reported here were 2 previous incidents regarding the gun on set. Yes. Will this help or hurt Baldwin? Thanks also for my gifted membership. So again, a lot of the stuff in this case, I could kind of see going either way. Like, did Baldwin even know about it? And if he didn't, does that make it more the armorer's fault or Hull's fault? What should he have known? What should he have done? What is his duty? And again, the rules of Hollywood are things we're probably going to learn. I'll just speak for myself, things I'm probably going to learn about during this trial if it happens, or if we hear about the discovery in this case. Thank you, Azam, for this super sticker. Oh, all right. I gotta wind it down here. Sandy said, do a live with Netwoman in LA. I'll probably just have my phone. So we'll have to do something with my phone. Pesky Pirouette, thank you for the super sticker as well. All right. Yes, he was the producer and an actor. Yes, I agree. All right. Bodie said, sigh, everything is a gray area. Unfortunately, in the law, it usually feels that way. All right, I'm going to go. Turn on your autoplay so you can get redirected to our next video, which is starting in 1 minute. Don Adelson back in court talking about attorney-client conflict issues, speedy trial, what's going on in that case. Is Raspbaum angry about what happened? How's he acting towards the prosecutor? How should lawyers act in those situations? I appreciate you guys so much for joining me. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our page. We want your input. We want your questions. We want your comments. I appreciate them so much. I think it's what makes the content valuable and why people keep coming back to these videos and these discussions with the chat, you know. So until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.